Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party, home to such great podcasts as Nerd Nuptial, Missing Frames, Aggressive Negotiations, and many, many more. On this week's episode, if Beale Street could talk, it would say, stick around to hear what we have to say about it. Also coming up for discussion are our top 5 directorial streaks. And of course, you can't talk about streaks without mentioning The Undertaker, and I'm your co-host Dallas King, so if I'm the dead man, I need my brother of destruction, Kane. Lee Hutchison, how are you, Lee?
Yeah, we certainly seem to be getting in a trend now of making WWE references. I really feel like I've missed out on my childhood. Most of these references are going over my head. I can pretty much do worked into a shoot, and that's about all I can do from the wrestling.
Well, I'll try and avoid next week, but once I've seen Fighting with My Family starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson, I'm sure I'll be able to work a few more in that way. But
that could be a good education for me. I'm very excited for that one.
I think it will be. Yeah, I'm going to miss it at the Glasgow Film Festival, but it's only out a week later, so we don't have that long to wait as well. And it's actually been getting some very good reviews, especially from non-wrestling fans. So it'll be interesting to see how that one comes out. But before we get into the streak, we always talk about, we've been doing this thing this year, 52 films by women, where we each pick a film to highlight for audiences to try and watch. So what have you caught anything this week that's caught your eye that you want to tell people to see?
Yeah, there's a film I was really keen to catch at the London Film Festival, but it continued to evade me, and it was The Breaker Uppers, which has nicely landed up on Netflix this week. So it's a New Zealand comedy produced by Taika Waititi, directed by Madeline Sammy and Jackie Van Beek, two New Zealand actresses and talent that have written, directed and starred in their own comedy. So the title kind of says it all, really. So it's these two BFFs decide to ruthlessly end any romances that they get paid to go for. So a guy or a woman looks to escape a relationship, they step in, pretending they're pregnant, or turn up as police officers and say that they've gone missing in the desert. Yeah, it's a good comedy. I really enjoyed it. The laugh ratio is pretty high. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a real kind of Sunday night movie where I enjoyed it over a Chinese last night and found it to be really charming. So yeah, it's definitely well worth checking out. It's definitely going to be one of the sort of in the top tier perhaps of kind of Netflix movies for the past year anyway. So not that says much sometimes, but I think that's but I think this one is one that people will enjoy. It's disposable to an extent, but it's highly enjoyable.
Yeah, the quality of Netflix films, he says, 1 week away from Roma winning Best Picture at the Oscars.
Yes, exactly. That's the top tier, but it's one of these Netflix can be a bit of a pick and mix sometimes. You go right, you get something brilliant like the Romas and Calibers, then you get something like the Breaker Uppers where it's like, oh, this is really good, enjoyable, and then it can sort of just seems to drop off a cliff quite badly from there sometimes.
Well, I know exactly what you mean. But Netflix, yeah, there is always a varying barometer of quality, but what it does provide actually at the moment is a lot of films directed by women. So if you're trying to do something like this, it helps quite a lot, because I was in the same boat. I was needing something to do for this week and went on Netflix. I saw The Breaker Uppers and had a feeling that you were going to pick that one. So I watched something else this week. I watched I Think We're Alone Now, which was directed by Reed Morano, a female director who's directed a few episodes of Handmaid's Tale, also Billions. This is really her sort of first major feature, but she's actually worked quite extensively as a cinematographer. More often, she did Beyonce's Lemonade, but she's also doing The Skeleton Twins, Kill Your Darlings as well, Shut Up and Play the Hits. So she's worked quite extensively, but this is one of her first sort of big films. And essentially, it's a post-apocalyptic sort of drama where it stars Peter Dinklage as the last man alive, sort of in this small Californian town. He sort of works in a library. He's sort of going around house to house, sort of cleaning them all up, disposing the bodies and stuff like that. You don't really know why they're in the situation he's in the situation he's in. But as with all these sort of films, another survivor turns up and it changes the dynamic, sort of upends of how he goes about his life. Initially, he's sort of very standoffish to this girl played by Elle Fanning, but eventually sort of likes having her around. And then, as always in these sort of films, you need a third act twist to sort of, because two people at the end of the world, not doing much, maybe doesn't make for the most exciting, riveting television or filmmaking. So therefore, you need a bit of a sort of Deus Ex Machina, I guess, of something that comes along to upend their lives again. And this happens. I don't want to say any more about it because, it's an okay film. It's perfectly watchable. It's not anything groundbreaking, whatever. But I did kind of like where they went in the third act. But I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Although I will spoil something, and the biggest disappointment for this film was the fact that the song "I Think We're Alone Now" does not feature anywhere in the film. That was what I was expecting. I was expecting it to at least be the end credit song. It didn't happen, so it did let me down there slightly. But again, I think it's a good one to watch if you're looking for something to complete the challenge and you're on Netflix and you've already watched The Breaker Uppers or whatever. There's a few things on at the moment that you can really sort of make a good headway into your list for the year, I think, on Netflix at the moment.
I think that's a really good kind of pick. I hadn't realised that was actually added onto Netflix. It was a movie I remember like a few months ago getting like a marketing email going, hey, this film's coming out, and thinking, that sounds pretty interesting. I'm sure I'll catch it at some point. But the fact that I can now watch it at home seems kind of, that's no kind of excuse for me now.
Yeah, no, I think I'd seen the trailer a couple of months ago and hadn't really heard much more about it. It was just... went into Netflix, typed in the movies directed by women thread, and it came up there, and I was like, oh, great, fantastic, I'll give that a watch. And yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. So yeah, so what else have you been watching this week?
Yeah, I've kind of caught up with a few things. I finally got round to watching The Kid Who Would Be King. We had a review interview with Joe Cornish recently, so I went and saw that. It was a really enjoyable movie. It's, as I kind of said in my interview last week, it was really good to have a kids film aimed completely at kids, and the audience seemed to be a real mix when I went to catch it, of kind of young kids, families. I think the odd sort of person like myself that was probably a fan of Joe Cornish's writing and filmmaking, podcasting, etc. So it was really good to kind of catch a film like that. I got to see If Beale Street Could Talk, so obviously that was a bit of a rewatch there. So yeah, it's been quite good to kind of, I've been so busy lately, so it's the kind of the next week or so is going to be a bit of a big catch up at the cinema for me. So it's a bit small this week, but kind of as the week will kind of progress, I'm going to start diving into some more films.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'm the same actually. I haven't really caught much since sort of the Lego movie a couple of years ago. I did watch High Flying Bird on Netflix, which for me is the best movie about sports since Moneyball, and also one of those very, it's like, again, Steven Soderbergh filming a film on his iPhone, but also it's a film about basketball that doesn't actually feature any basketball being played, but it's still a fantastic film. So I highly recommend it, that one. And yeah, no, I guess, yeah, with our other little side project, the A24 project, it does make it difficult because, we're trying to squeeze in an extra 2 films on a rewatch every week as well. And I might as well use this point for the shameless plug. If you go into the Nerd Party feed, this week you'll see an extra bonus episode of the A24 project, which features Lee interviewing Millie Shapiro from Hereditary. And if you are kind enough to go into iTunes and leave us a written review, we're not saying you have to leave us a 5-star review, although 5 stars is preferable, but any type of review on iTunes, you'll be put into a draw to win a Hereditary t-shirt by the awesome guys at Last Exit to Nowhere. So that's up on the Twitter feed. You can see it's a really cool design based on the Hail Payman symbol. But Lee, do you want to give a brief highlights of what it was like to speak to Millie last week?
Yeah, it was a real pleasure to kind of talk with her. Hopefully she won't be our first and last A24 guest that we get on the podcast. I mean, it was really good to kind of go behind the scenes on something like Hereditary, and I can imagine for like a young actress, you get your roles, and even though she sort of played Matilda on Broadway, like, I always, what blew me away about sort of Hereditary was, as much as the film was great, was how big that marketing campaign, how viral it went, and it was really interesting because she was front and center of it. And whether you've seen the film or not, you recognize the face, the characteristics of her character. So it was really interesting to hear what it was like to sort of be in that whirlwind of Hereditary. And she was such a great person to interview, and it was a real pleasure. So hopefully, it, as of kind of recording time, the episode just dropped today. So hopefully, people will enjoy it and find it.
Oh no, I've listened to it, and it was a fantastic interview, and she was so lovely and forthcoming, and talking about sort of working with Toni Collette and stuff like that, but also her sort of growing up and the sort of theatrical work as well, because I knew she was in Matilda, but I hadn't really heard the story of how she got that role, so that was really fascinating to hear. And like you say, hopefully not the last A24 guest that we'll have on that show. But 2 weeks ago, we were talking about our top 5 Annapurna films, and I said that Beale Street Could Talk may have, if I'd seen it by the time we did that list, it may have affected my list, and I'm happy to say it definitely would have. And you said you didn't want to put it in your list because the reason it would have been in your list was a bit of a spoiler or whatever. So we can now get into the meat and bones of Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk. So Lee, what was it about the film that you loved so much?
I mean, like, so kind of cover your ears if you haven't seen this film yet and you're not looking for spoilers, was that this film is sort of a ticking time bomb of a movie. That you have Kiki Lane's character Tish is trying desperately to get Stephen James's Fonny out of jail. The guy is innocent, he's been accused of rape, he's in jail, he could be going to jail for quite a long time, and she's fighting to prove his innocence. And it's this whole ticking time bomb of she could give birth, any kind of day now, really, and he could be in jail. And you're watching this film sort of expecting sort of that happy ending. Oh my god, she is gonna get him out, it's gonna be, they're gonna all be reunited, and that doesn't happen at all. That at the end of the movie, the guy has to take a plea deal, because that's what we've discovered in earlier in the film as well, that many other black individuals have had to face. And the film ends with Fonny still in jail. We don't know how long he's going to be in jail for. It could be decades, it could be years. He might nearly be finished his term, but he is in jail, and he is this young kid that he has never kind of got to, almost be with as he's grown up, apart from in sort of this kind of meeting room for kind of the criminals and their family. And it is such a tragic ending, but I'm sat there thinking through the whole time, and I've seen it twice, is that, well, surely they're going to get out. And whether that's my kind of white privilege or expectations with, when we see these type of films where the white guy's accused of a crime that he hasn't committed, he usually gets his just desserts in the end, and he's freed, or is those that have wronged him have been exposed. But that doesn't happen here, and we are left with an absolute sucker punch of an ending. And I didn't expect that at all up until the moment it happened. The film didn't go anywhere I expected it to go, and it said a lot to me about myself and what my expectations are, and perhaps my views on race. And I just thought it was such a bold move from the film that the bomb ultimately goes off in her belly, and they aren't able to kind of solve the problem in time.
I know what you mean about the sucker punch, because it is that thing that in any sort of, if you were going by the normal Hollywood sort of plot device and how to build a screenplay, there would be a piece of evidence would come forward, or whatever, he would get released, you'd be able to, they'd all live happily ever after and whatever. But this was based on a book by James Baldwin, and he had clearly lived through times like this. He clearly seen friends and family and stuff sort of go to jail and sort of have this thing where basically there was so many sort of African Americans in jail at the time awaiting trial, that the only way that they could, I wouldn't say further their case, but basically move on with their lives, was to take a plea deal and then sort of get a sort of slightly reduced sentence, and then get out the other side. There was that fantastic scene sort of about halfway through with Brian Tyree Henry about another a friend of Fonny's who'd been to jail and come out, and it's just, they're having fun, they're having beers, they're catching up, and then gradually the happy shell of this man is broken down, and what prison did to him sort of sort of all sort of spills out in this tragic sort of scene, but are just fantastically acted. And for me, I thought it was just one of the best sort of love stories I've seen on screen. I would say probably since In the Mood for Love back in 2000. I think part of it is because of this score, which is basically the same sort of motif sort of played in slightly different ways, but it's all on strings, and it sort of reminded me of the music that was used in The Mood for Love. Again, a couple that you are desperately rooting for to be together, but circumstances won't allow it. And I like the way that it's sort of moving forward with the story from where Tish is announcing her pregnancy and moving forward to giving birth, but then going back in flashbacks as well to the time that they sort of got together. And I mean, the chemistry between the two of them is just perfect. And I mean, the supporting cast as well. I mean, the scene where Tish's family invite Fonny's family over to break the news, and I mean that the mother, Fonny's mother, is a right piece of work, and some of the lines that they come out with are just absolutely brilliant. And it's like the when I watched it, the audience, I mean, they were howling with laughter at that point, but then all it takes is a slap across the face, and suddenly it's like stunned silence. It's like it flips on a dime, and I mean the look of the film, the soundtrack, and everything about it, I thought was just exceptional for me. It's probably the best film I've seen so far this year, hands down.
Yeah, I mean, I did a list last year of like some of my favorite scenes, and that dinner party scene, it like even on a repeat viewing, it just holds up so well. Like the dialogue is just fantastic, the insults, the tension in the room, it's just like it's perfect. And I really liked the film the first time I saw it. But I think I had a problem at the time where I think I had it sort of in and around sort of the 10 mark of kind of my films of last year. And I kind of watched it sort of midway through the London Film Festival. I was really tired, and I really liked it. I enjoyed it a lot. And then I kind of been desperate to sort of rewatch it again in sort of better circumstances. And like this time, I think I had it before, perhaps like a 4 or a 4.5. Like this shot up to a 5. Like and it's very rare that a film will increase perhaps an expectation on a second watch. Maybe I'll find issues with it. I just think it's a pretty perfect movie. It's as good as Moonlight. I just think it had so much to say. It's such a brilliant cast, and I'm sitting there thinking that that is like the budget for this was about 15 million perhaps. It's incredible that what they've done with that money. And with someone like Barry Jenkins, he could have done anything under the sun, taken any amount of money after something like Moonlight, but he has created something that is been, I'm not one to get offended or annoyed about Oscars or kind of even bother with kind of the outrage of them, but this film really has been robbed of a best picture nomination. When you look at some of the other films in there, regardless of what you think of them, how this movie didn't make that list, I genuinely don't know. I can't process.
I know, because I think there's 8 nominees for best picture. They could have gone to 10, and we won't address the queen-sized elephant in the room, of which one I don't think should be on there anyway. But I think, yeah, absolutely, this should have been on there for that. The director as well, I think he could have easily been director. I think at the moment, I think its best sort of Oscar chances are best original score and probably best adapted screenplay, which I think it does have a shot. But I mean, if just seeing from the Writers Guild Awards yesterday, I think the adapted one went to Can You Ever Forgive Me, which now means it's the most open Oscar race we've ever had, where each guild has actually given the best prize essentially to something else. So no idea what would happen, but I think Regina King has got a good shout for Best Supporting Actress as well, because with Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz being nominated for The Favourite, I think they will split the vote there, and then I think that will allow her to come through, because she's fantastic in the film as well. But I know, I mean, what you say is, I mean, yeah, he could have done it. I mean, Moonlight for me was just, it wasn't a film which I don't think I really got it first time round. It was only on a rewatch that I realised how good it actually was. And this for me is, he's made 2 5-star films in a row, which beautifully segues into our other topic for today's filibuster, which is looking at the top directorial streaks. And when we're talking about streaks, we're not talking about Will Ferrell and Old School streaking up the quad to the gymnasium. We're talking about a streak, the kind that's more sort of accustomed to sports. You've got I think it's James Harkins, the Houston Rockets player, who's currently got a streak going of 30-plus point games. He's sort of tied Wilt Chamberlain's record. He might, break it after the All-Star game break there. You've got the Invincibles, Arsenal's 49-game unbeaten run, which included the entire 2003-2004 season. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, you can't talk about streaks without talking about The Undertaker, who went famously 21-0 at WrestleMania. Now, I know wrestling is scripted, and clearly it was storylined that way. But for me, watching it, as I grew up watching wrestling, and for me, that was the purest thing in wrestling. No matter what else was going on, you always knew, but they're never going to... The Undertaker was one of the most respected wrestlers of all time. They're not going to ruin the streak. He will retire undefeated at WrestleMania. And then Brock Lesnar comes along, beats him 21-1, and everyone was completely in shock. They couldn't believe this had happened. So what we're looking for today is a great run of films. No director is infallible. There will always be a Brock Lesnar in his career somewhere. I mean, you just look at some of the greatest of all time. Steven Spielberg. You think, that'll be easy. He'll have tons of films in a row. But, you've got something like 1941, which breaks up, his Jaws, Close Encounters, then Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T. and whatever. So sometimes it's very difficult to actually find an unbroken run. Hitchcock, he's got a great run from Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, The Birds and whatever, but some other sides that are just maybe not as, they can still be good films, but they're not as good as the director's capable of. So what we're going to do is we've got 5 each, and we'll start at the bottom depending on the number of films you've got on the run, and then we'll move up to the top. It's interesting to see if we've got any crossover here. We might not. We might have the same director, but we might have different films, I'm now thinking, depending what it is. So Lee, what is your first pick in your streak?
Appropriately at number 5, I've gone with Alexander Payne with Election, About Schmidt, Sideways, The Descendants, and Nebraska.
So he's starting with a 5. He's coming out all guns blazing, because there was a BFI thing that said that basically they had a lot of directors that had 5 streaks of 5, but it's very difficult to get above. So I'm going to be interested to see where you go with from here. So what's your justification? Why do you like those films so much?
Yeah, I should add first that I hope this doesn't spoil my list, but there unfortunately is no women directors that have made my list, and I really wanted to get some in there. I try and force something in, or whether one linked in. I mean, Lynn Ramsey came very close, but I probably, unlike nearly everyone else, I wasn't a fan of my mind's gone completely blank on the name of the last film. You Were Never Really Here. I didn't like that as much as most people, but it made me think that sort of, we think of male directors, some of them fail upwards, or male directors get a lot more chance and money thrown at them, and it was a struggle to find female directors that had a good streak of movies made. Maybe there was kind of 3s, there was some 4s, but there wasn't that many, and it became kind of obvious to me, and sort of a bit of a telling sign about sort of Hollywood. But kind of for Alexander Payne, for me, Election is one of my all-time favourite comedies. About Schmidt, I think, it's a film I haven't really rewatched too much, but I think is an enjoyable one. Sideways is one of my all-time favourite films. The Descendants, I haven't watched that again since the cinema, but one I also really enjoyed. And Nebraska was a heartbreaking film, and it certainly evoked memories of my grandfather in particular, and I remember watching the film and feeling quite emotional. And I just think that's such a kind of diverse range there. I mean, downsizing ended the streak at 5, but I think there's so many different types of films there. You've got kind of a bit of a romantic comedy drama in the form of Sideways, family and The Descendants, black and white tale in Nebraska, Election, teen comedy satire about Schmidt, which was one of probably Jack Nicholson's finest moments, and sort of kind of restarted his career sort of the late 90s, early 2000s. I think it's such a kind of great streak of diverse films, and one where I thought, yeah, I had to get him in there.
Yeah, no, it's a good list. And speaking of female directors, and one in particular that you mentioned, we might get onto that in a little bit. But at my number five, I'm starting off low with three, but it's an unbeaten streak at the moment. It's still going. It's still an active streak, and I'm going Damien Chazelle with Whiplash, La La Land, and First Man. All for me fantastic films, and all films which end with two characters looking at each other in complete silence. So yeah, he's got a streak going in terms of five-star films, and he's got that thematic link at the end. Will his fourth film be a five-star film? Will it end with two people looking at each other and not saying anything? Who knows? But at the moment, I'm excited to see what he does in the future as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great selection of movies like Whiplash and La La Land. I love. I think they're brilliant films. First Man I liked, but not as much as some people. I'm kind of probably due a rewatch of that. But yeah, he's one of these directors that have gone in kind of three films and probably really by two, of like, oh my god, I can't wait to see what he does next. I'm going to be there opening weekend, and that's a very rare thing to get.
Yeah, no, it's for such a young person to make such, an impressive debut. I mean, you had Orson Welles back in the day making Citizen Kane and was declared this wonder kid, but then was immediately almost found himself at odds with the studios and unable to make films his way. And they were, ridiculed and critiqued out all to hell. And it was only, once like Touch of Evil sort of came back out and was re-edited the way he wanted it to, that people started to really truly appreciate it. So the fact that this guy's been able to make three sort of classic films already is, yeah, like you say, I'm very excited to see what he's got coming in the future. So what have you got at number four?
Yeah, I have gone up from 5 to 7, so I am
Whoa.
going with Paul Thomas Anderson. Yeah, we're still there's we can go much higher. We're not going up to 11, but we're going higher. So Paul Thomas Anderson, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice, and The Phantom Thread. So, and this could have been a broken streak, and perhaps a bit lower, had I not rewatched The Inherent Vice last year in the cinema. But I love Paul Thomas Anderson. He's one of my all-time favourite directors, and all of those movies, Inherent Vice aside, I would give a 5 out of 5 to. I know you disliked Phantom Thread or didn't like as much as I did, but he excites me, and sometimes the movies perhaps don't land on a first watch for me, but then on a repeat viewing, maybe when I'm not as hyped up in my head, they really they pack such a great punch. And I think that's such a great mix of movies, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, and Adam Driver romantic comedy. There Will Be Blood, this masterpiece, western. The Master, a period piece. Inherent Vice, another fantastic period piece. The Phantom Thread, this sort of British, movie. He's such an exciting director, and I'm curious to see what he does next. And I think, yeah, Inherent Vice, I was so close to breaking that streak, and it was a film I really didn't enjoy the first time I watched it, but when I watched it last year and accepted that the story just washes over you, stopped trying to make sense of the mystery, it kept the streak going, so it was broken and then unbroken for me.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Inherent Vice would have been, and Phantom Thread I wasn't really a fan of. Appreciated, but not a fan of, so therefore, yeah, I wouldn't have probably put him any higher than sort of probably five. Again, maybe Punch Drunk Love. I probably would need to see it again in order to be able to truly place him on the list. But no, I appreciate where you're coming from for that one. So at my four, I have a four, and I was thinking of, I mean, I've gone with Lynn Ramsey, so I've gone with a female director. So Ratcatcher, Morven Caller, We Need to Talk About Kevin, and then You Were Never Really Here, which I loved last year. I thought it was great. I think she's a fantastic filmmaker. Would she be having this streak if she had more opportunities to make more films? Because I mean, I think you're kind of looking at an average sort of gap of about 7 years between films. So, if she was working at a more steady pace, whether that's her choice or she's just, she's just trying to find the project she wants, or, it's just Hollywood sort of keeping the door shut to her, perhaps that would change. But I thought I think that she's a fantastic filmmaker. She's got a very unique style. And I've put her in the list ahead of Francis Ford Coppola, who had a streak of 4 with The Godfather, Godfather Part 2, The Conversation, and Apocalypse Now. So I think that gives some indication of how highly I would rate Lynn Ramsey's. And again, it's a streak that is unbroken. It's ongoing as well.
Yeah, it's certainly well earned, and I do feel that she was kind of let down in terms of sort of Oscars and nomination chats. I mean, as I say, I wasn't a big a fan of the movie as most people, but it's certainly one I respect, and I thought she did a great job, and I really wanted to get her on my list, but unfortunately, when you start at 5 for my streak, it's going to be really hard for most people to get into.
Yeah, well, you can either go with the head or go with the heart, and you've gone with the heart rather than the head, just trying to shoehorn her in. So what's next? I keep saying it seems odd to ask for your number 3 and then you give me a higher number. So who's next on your list?
We're going up to 8, and we're going with Hayao Miyazaki with My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, Parco Rosa, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, and The Wind Rises, which is an impressive streak, which could have even been longer if I had seen some of his films pre My Neighbor Totoro, and he's one of probably the most influential kind of directors of all time, especially for animation. And I often think that if I ever had a kid, like, I would be making sure that they devoured this guy's movies, Studio Ghibli. He is, more than just a great director. He's someone that is kind of an emblem of kind of Japanese animation. And, you think of something like My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, The Wind Rises. These are some of the best films of those years. It's not just a case that they're some of the best animated films, but they're some of the best films. And you see things like the influence of Totoro on popular culture. This is a film that's as old as I am, and people are still loving it and finding it to this day, and it's very rare that you get sort of animation of that time which kind of has that effect. And I think he is an incredible director, and I don't know if it's still on there, but there's an Amazon Prime documentary which follows him as he's creating The Wind Rises, which will be his last film with Studio Ghibli, and kind of going through his creative process, how he draws and paints and directs these movies. And it's a really special documentary, well worth watching. So his streak is 8, but if I get around to catching up with the other films, it could actually push him towards number 1.
Wow. Yeah, no, he's a fantastic filmmaker, and I think I just haven't seen enough of his films in order to truly rank him on the list. I think I remember seeing Howl's Moving Castle, and I wasn't that keen on it, but I mean, like, Spirited Away and Totoro and stuff are just some of the finest animation films. I mean, when you said you were talking about having kids, I thought you were going to say you were going to name your kids Ponyo or something like that.
No, not quite.
Not quite, no. So my the third person on my list, I've gone up to 5 now, and it's a broken streak, but for me it's one hell of a run in the sort of mid 80s to early 90s, and that is Rob Reiner with Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, and A Few Good Men. Now that's just, I mean, you've got childhood nostalgia, you've got fantasy fairy tale, you've got the best romantic comedy of all time, you've got Stephen King chiller, and then, probably one of the most iconic courtroom dramas of all time. And, he's incredibly diverse, and, he was that stereotypical 80s director. He had the beard, he had the baseball cap and whatever, but I just think he can tackle several different genres, and I think he's just a class act. And, all of those films are just, for me, great and always rewatchable films as well. I would, if any of those films came on the telly, I would quite happily sit down and rewatch all of them. Or even if I started watching it halfway through, I'd watch them through to the end. I just think they are all classics, and I think a worthy place on the list.
I think what's most impressive with that kind of streak that you've got there is that Spinal Tap didn't even make the cut on that kind of streak as well. So something broke it to not be included in that. But you think of all those movies you mentioned, and you still got an iconic one that he could have added to that list as well. It's some back catalogue he's got.
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna have to go back and figure out what it was that broke the streak. I think it was North that ended it after A Few Good Men. But what was the one before directing? Well, actually, I mean, if it wasn't for North, I mean, he had like the American president just after that. It was the Sure Thing, the John Cusack one, which is it's an all right, but it's not like sort of 5 star, which is what I would consider the rest of them to be. I've pretty much sort of gone pretty much 5 star all the way here to for my streaks here. So, but people will argue. Some people may not think that, but again, these are all personal opinions. Really, it's what we think, and so therefore you can't really. You can argue, but you still have to appreciate why people have chosen them. So, what have you got at your number two? Because, I mean, I top out at 7 here, so I'm interested to see how far you're going to go with your numbers.
Well, I'm joint on 8 with this one. So it was one of his first ever movies would have made the streak, but then a couple of broken ones in there. And then starting with The Squid and the Whale, Margot at the Wedding, Greenberg, Francis Ha, While We're Young, Mistress America, De Palma, and the Meyerowitz stories. It's Noah Baumbach.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and I think I know where your number one might go then. But yeah, no.
Yes.
But yeah, no. I think he's a great writer and a great director. I think yeah, some of those didn't really connect with me, maybe clearly as they connected with you. But I mean, Squid and the Whale, I thought was great. So Francis Ha is a real opinion splitter. Just ask my wife who hated it. But I find its charms in there. But I mean, like While We're Young, which we discussed on the A24 project, really I thought was great. But yeah, what is it about his writing? Is it his writing, his directing? What is it about him that you love so much?
I think it's one of those ones that I think sort of The Squid and the Whale, Margot at the Wedding, Franz Ha, Greenberg, While We're Young, Mistress America, Meyerowitz stories in particular. I love the writing. Directing wise, he has some real kind of standout moments, a great eye. But I really like his kind of style of writing. It feels very tailored to things that I kind of like. I do love that sort of New Yorky culture, elitism sort of movies, and he does them incredibly well. And I mean, you've kind of got De Palma in there, which is a very basic documentary in the grand scheme of things. It's De Palma talking to the camera about his films with some clips. But De Palma was a director I kind of liked, enjoyed, and didn't really think much about. But that documentary that Noah Baumbach put together was one I watched and I thought, I appreciate this director all the more. And it was something so simple and basic, but it did the job. And we'll discuss that in an eventual episode of sort of the A24 project. But he's just a director where he always gets me quite excited. And something like Francis has one of my favourite films of sort of the kind of probably ever, to be honest. I know it certainly seems to split opinion in your household, but yeah, I just think he's such a fantastic writer, director, and I think he's on a hell of a streak. And some of his early work that didn't make the list, I think, is still interesting. Some of it's better than others. I really enjoy Kicking and Screaming a hell of a lot, but he seems to be a director which I feel like he makes films that are so tailor-made to my niche interests.
Absolutely. So I'm excited to hear your number one because I would write it down on a piece of paper and just to see. I think I know who you're going to go with. Given where you're at with numbers, sort of just now, I think I know where it's going to go. But at the moment, I was on 5 with Rob Reiner, and I'm moving up. My second pick is another unbroken streak, and one which I hope continues for a long, long time. But it's a streak of 5, and we're going Prisoners, Enemy, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049. It's Denis Villeneuve, who I believe is the best director working today.
That's a fantastic choice. I mean, I can't believe I never thought of that one. That should have been perhaps on my list. That is a good choice.
It is. I mean, I was introduced to him with Prisoners, which I think I was going through probably like a interesting sort of Jake Gyllenhaal sort of phase. I think he's a fantastic actor, so I think I went to see it because of that. And I mean, he got a fantastic sort of performance out of Hugh Jackman with that one. Very sort of against the grain of what you expect Hugh Jackman to do. It was just a great sort of thriller, sort of child abduction thriller. Then Enemy, as we've discussed on the A24 project, fantastic. Sicario was just like one of the tensest films I think I've ever seen. It was like I was expecting at any moment someone could get just their head blown off with a shotgun or something. It was that tense. Arrival was my favourite film of 2016. I just thought it was immense. And Blade Runner 2049 is a film which should never have existed. we never asked for a Blade Runner sequel, but we got one, and it had no right being as good as it was. This was like $150 million sort of art film. It's just like, I can't believe they allowed him to make it the way that they did, but I am so glad that they did. It was a film which was nearly 3 hours, but I could have happily sat through 4 or 5 of that film. And his next film, Dune, has got like, it's like the greatest cast of all time at the moment. It's got Chalamet, Oscar Isaac, Bardem, Brolin, Zendaya. It's just like Batista. It's just like every day you're expecting them to announce. Well, it's getting to the point where you're expecting them not to announce who's starring in it, but basically who's not going to be in Dune. It's that star-studded. And, if Dune doesn't turn out to be a 5-star film, I will be like the guy who they made a meme of when Brock Lesnar beat The Undertaker. I will be bug-eyed, just like in total shock, going, I can't believe this has happened. Everything about this film should be great. How did he screw it up? So hopefully he doesn't, and hopefully the streak will continue. At this point, I was thinking Cuarón maybe might have been able to make on lists. You had stuff like Roma, Gravity, Children of Men, but you Mama Tambien, but you've got like a Harry Potter. He has made the greatest Harry Potter film of them all, but I just couldn't reconcile with that being on my list. So yeah, no, Cuarón didn't make it, and Denis Villeneuve was my number 2. So we reached the top spot. I'm going to see. So you tied with 8. Was it a streak of 8? Who have you gone with?
Well, who do you think I've gone with?
I think you've gone with Wes Anderson.
And no, I have not.
Okay.
Unfortunately, one film completely breaks the streak, and that's the Darjeeling Limited, which I'm just not a fan of personally. So
really,
yeah.
I was thinking about Wes Anderson, but it's Moonrise Kingdom for me breaks the streak. I just never connected with Moonrise Kingdom. So if it's not Wes Anderson, who have you gone with?
At 9, with Memento, Insomnia, Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, and Dunkirk, it is the most white male choice possible, and that is Christopher Nolan.
Could I just say that my number 1 choice is Christopher Nolan with 7, because I wasn't as keen on Insomnia. But I think if you were to do a list of straight white men and ask them to do a streak of who would be at the top, I think this will all come down to people's love or hate for The Dark Knight Rises. I think Dark Knight Rises is the perfect ending to that trilogy. I know a lot of people who don't like it, but I really love what he did with it. It does have some plot holes and stuff like that, but for me, it just, everything about it is, it just keeps in fitting with what he did for Batman, and for me it's the greatest superhero trilogy of all time. But why is Nolan your pick? What is it about his films which you love so much, and is there any in particular that you would highlight on the list?
I think he may not be my most all-time favorite director, but he's a director where I really enjoy his films. They're like the fact that his next movie is it's dubbed at the moment Warner Brothers event movie. Like, his movies are events, and there's very few out and out directors that have that kind of label with them. Someone like Edgar Wright, for example, who I think is fantastic and very close to making the list. For example, are his movies considered big events? Not really, not in that respect. But whereas kind of Nolan, they're big, and they're big sci-fi epics, they're big comic book epics, they're big war epics, and I'm so curious to see what he ever does next. That he could probably easily make the list and make it turn into a 10. I just think he's just one of the most exciting directors, and I know he has his critics, and I think some of it is more labeled at people that like him than actually his own work. But he is just an exciting director that has just made hit after hit after hit. That, yes, they have some of their flaws, but I can't knock the guy. I just think his films are brilliant.
Yeah, at the moment, yeah. Is he the greatest filmmaker of all time? No, not at the moment. But, in terms of, as we were talking here, sort of unbroken run of filmmaking, he is on the top of his game. I thought Dunkirk was a very sort of different take on a war film, but I thought it was absolutely thrilling. As thrilling as like I said, Sicario was. You were on the edge of your seat the entire time. Interstellar, yeah, for some people it doesn't really click, but I got completely swept up in it and potentially sort of almost prefer that to 2001. But I think you mentioned Edgar Wright earlier there. I was just looking through and it's like, yeah, actually, I would probably rate all 5 of his feature films 5 out of 5. But the fact that we don't have him on our list, I mean, then, if we'd had Edgar Wright and Christopher Nolan at the top of our list, basically people would have just accused us of being like Empire Magazine or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, do you not know any other directors who aren't, white men and stuff like that? So it's probably best that we didn't have, and we have a slight bit of diversity on our list.
Absolutely,
But,
yeah.
for
I
me-
think we've got something good.
So, but we kind of discussed it on the interview episode with Darren Mooney. What's your top Nolan film out of that
Ooh.
streak?
Interstellar, I think it's just...
And
I love sci-fi. It's my first love, and to get a truly original sci-fi movie like that blew me away in IMAX. I got to see it live with an orchestra. It's just an incredibly special movie, and I think it stands out quite differently from a lot of his movies there. And I mean, it's ultimately the story of a father and his daughter, kind of across time and space, and I think it's something pretty special.
yeah, no, completely understand that. For me, it's always been, pretty much since the first time I saw it, was The Prestige, which I think is just masterful filmmaking. It just takes you on a ride, and you don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I just love the ending of it. And again, Christian Bale, we all know is a fantastic actor, but again, Nolan is someone who's managed to get a fantastic, non-Wolverine performance out of Hugh Jackman, and I think it's just great. And yeah, it's the top one for me. So yeah, so if you're listening, we'd love to hear what you would pick as your top director streaks. Someone else who nearly made my list was John Carpenter, who had a great run in the late 70s, early 80s. But, perhaps you've got someone else in mind, do let us know, especially if they're female or a non-white man in his 30s or 40s. Please let us know. So you can, and if people want to debate this with us on Twitter, Lee, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo.
And you can find me on Twitter at @champcelluloid. So, and let us know what your top director streaks are. But until next time, this has been Filibuster, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.